Hey guys, it's Nicole over at Two Chicks Quilting here in Ganado, Texas, and I'm hopping on right now to do our tips and tricks with Two Chicks at 2 p.m. on our Tuesday. So happy Valentine's Day to everybody, and I figured what fun it would be to kind of go over a heart block. So we are going to be talking about raw edge applique. The other couple weekends ago, I think it was, Autumn had posted this in our Two Chicks, Friends of Two Chicks Quilting group, a free table runner that you could make. And so it was a raw edge applique. Now, I know a lot of people probably haven't tackled that or any raw edge applique because they're just scared of it. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it. So I just wanted to give a couple tips and tricks in order to accomplish that. So like I said, that was a free pattern in our Friends of Two Chicks Quilting. So if you want to go download that, it's perfect for Valentine's Day. I know it's a little late this year to make it, but it's just a cute block in general to make anyways. So a couple of things that I want to go over. When we are appliquing, there's a couple of different ways that we can do it. We are going to be doing raw edge applique, and what that means, it's going to be a raw edge finished with the fabric, and we're just going to stitch it down. Now there's needle turn applique where we're turning it, the fabric down like this and stitching it down so then it doesn't have a raw edge finish. But what the raw edges means that the raw edge of it, it's going to be exposed, and we're going to do some kind of decorative stitch in order to stitch it down. Now, when I am doing my quilt blocks or my project blocks, if you were making the blocks first and then piecing them, I suggest you always want to start with your background fabric bigger than what you want it to be. So, for instance, if you want a 12-inch block finished, I would start with a 14-inch block, and then once you do the applique, trim it down. What tends to happen is once we put applique and fabric upon fabric upon fabric and adding stitches to it, our fabric tends to shrink some. So if we start with a 12.5-inch block, which that's what we want it to be when we start piecing it together, and we start adding stitches on top and stitches on top, that fabric's going to start walking in and shrinking a little bit. So if we start with a bigger block, do our applique, and then trim it down, we'll be good as gold. You can also piece together whatever you're piecing and then go back and do your applique at the very end. Now, the only problem with that is if you're doing a huge quilt and you have it all pieced and then you're going to go do your applique afterwards, maneuvering the quilt underneath your machine and other places. So if you're going to do your block by block by block and then start piecing it together, I do suggest start with the bigger block on your background fabric, and then after you do your applique, cut it down to size. So next thing, let's talk about our applique process. So we have a background fabric that we start with. This does not have any type of backing, sizing. Of course, we sized it already and have it all pressed and nice, but there's no backing or stabilizer on this piece whatsoever. I just have it just regular and ready to start stitching. Now, this is my process. It might not be everybody's process. You're just gonna have to find what works best for you. So my block is starting just a little bit bigger. The next is the pattern. So most paper patterns come like this, where you have it to print it out and then tape it together and have it all nice and pretty. The problem with paper is that it is paper. I promise it's going to slide underneath something and you're going to cut it and have to tape it again. Or once we're tracing it over and over and over again, it's starting to tear. It's not the right size anymore. So if this is going to be a pattern that you're going to be using a lot, my suggestion to you is to get some of this template plastic. It's a little bit of a thicker plastic, and you can trace it with permanent marker, trace it on there, and then cut it out. So now you have a good hardy template instead of a paper template. So that's one thing that you can do. The next thing that I like to do is whenever I'm doing applique, I like to use some kind of fusing element to it. Other people like to use a washable glue, the Soline glue stick, different things like that to stick their project to this the background fabric. My choice, I like to use something that's called like heat and bond. so it's fusible on both sides. It has a paper side, and then it has like a rough side that is sticky. So I will stick the rough side to my fabric on one side. That would be the back side of my fabric. And then once I get that on, I will peel off the paper side, and then that will stick to my background fabric so it holds it in place. That is the key, is definitely making sure that whatever you're appliquing to your background fabric is going to stay in place and hold in place. Some people like pins, some people like glue, and then others use some kind of bonding agent like heat and bond. So if you're using a heat and bond, what I like to do is take my heat and bond and have my template laying down on something that I'll be able to see it. The next thing I like to do is trace my template out on the paper side of my heat and bond. Tip: use a water-soluble or regular pencil or something that is not going to be erased when you put heat to it. Okay, tip number one. So definitely use a pencil that's not going to erase when heat is going to be applied to it. So I just took my heat and bonds and I traced out a couple of my hearts. Another thing you can do is you can go ahead and place your heat and bond on your fabric and then use your plastic templates and draw and trace around it. So these are just a couple of ways you can do it. The next thing I'm going to do is, after I have it traced on my heat and bond, I just take my fabric and I place my fabric wrong side down, and then I just take my heat and bond and place it on my fabric, and then I'm just going to start pressing it. And it does take just a moment to get everything good and set. Now, when you're working with heat and bond, it is always smart to get like an applique pressing sheet to put on top to protect your iron from the stickiness. Let me do this one real fast. There's also different layers and types of heat and bond, or steam or the different double-sided adhesives out there. They're different weight, as in like featherweight, lightweight, extra feather lightweight, heavy. So depending on what type of projects you're going to be doing, depends on what type of weight you're going to be using. So now I have my heat and bond fused to the wrong side of my fabric. And then now what I can do is take my rotary cutter or my scissors and just cut directly on that line. Now this is not going to be the prettiest because I'm trying to hurry. Yeah, that would be perfect. Also on this note, that there are different types of cutting machines and stuff also that you can do, like skin cuts and dyes for your AccuQuilt and different things that help with your applique, so you don't have to trace anything out and cut. So after I have my heart cut out, I just peel this paper off and get rid of the paper, and then expose a shiny side to it. So now what I'm going to do is, depending on where I want to put my applique, you're going to take your background fabric and have it right side up and just place your heart down. And then you're going to press that down. Now the good thing about using Heat and Bond or a double-sided adhesive like that is that once it's stuck on there, of course you're going to have to do a stitch around it to, you know, hold it up with laundering and different things like that. But if you want to cut and press all your blocks down and then go back later and do your decorative stitch on the outside, it's really nice to have this because it's bonded with that adhesive to it, and so you can go and shake and move and do whatever you need to do and it's not going to fall off. I like to use like the glue stick, the washable glue and different things like that whenever it's just something little and quick and fast. And so now I'm taking my smaller heart and I'm just putting it right on top of my other heart. Now, when you're layering different appliques like I am, you definitely want to use one of the lightest Heat and Bonds or double-sided adhesives as possible, because if you're using that heavy-duty, heavyweight one and you're putting layer upon layer upon layer, that gets really thick. And then when you go to quilt it, your machine's not going to be the happiest with you. So now I have my hearts, right? So now we're going to be doing our raw edge applique. So one popular stitch for raw edge applique is called a blanket stitch. And let me see if I can find my blanket stitch on here real fast for you guys. And I thought it was on my first page, and it's not. Anyways, okay, back to what I was saying. A blanket stitch. It looks like a E, so it stitches and follows the edge of the raw edge, and then it takes a step in and back, and then stitches and takes a step in and back, and then in and back. And so that's what they call a blanket stitch, and it's a really popular stitch that raw edge appliquers like to use. Now, really and truly, whenever you're doing a raw edge applique, you can use any decorative stitch to make it cute. So I'm going to play around with a couple of different ones. The key thing is that you do have to have your zigzag foot on, so you do need a zigzag foot. And then I like to have a little tester on mine. Now, you can see that I have two things of fabric and then a little piece of stabilizer in there. Whenever you're playing with decorative stitches or doing a decorative stitch, it's always nice to have that piece of stabilizer, which I have two of the Heat and Bond, so that makes it a little bit thick, to give it a little bit more stability. Another thing is to make sure you're going slow when you're doing your stitching. If you're going full speed at your stitching with your decorative stitches, it will start distorting it. So I'm just going to do a little test to see. Oh, see, that's too fast. To see how big this stitch is, and be able to play with it to see, okay, yep, I like that size, or I want to make it smaller and closer together. So now I'm going to make it smaller and a little closer together. And so now I'm just going to test it again. And so for our sake with you guys today, I won't be doing the hearts because they do take a little bit longer. And see, that's why you always want to test, because then you're like, that doesn't look good at all. But I will be doing just a cute little star. And let me find it real fast. Okay. So I like to always start on what I call like a straight edge and not at a point or not on a curve, just so that I have a good place so I can end. And what I'm going to do is, depending on what you're going to be stitching, what your decorative stitch is going to be, you're going to want to line up the stitch that's going to be right on the edge of that fabric. So then it's going to catch it. And I'm going to do a little bit of this so that y'all can see. This raw edge applique is great to use like your 28 weight thread or your heavier weight thread to do those decorative stitches so they really pop off and show on here. But this is always fun just to pick some crazy colors or that thicker thread so that you can really have fun with that design. And I want to get to a point just real fast so I can give you a tip on that then. And if this doesn't look the prettiest, guys, it's just because I'm going pretty fast. Oop, my thread broke. Okay. So we're just going to act like, because my thread broke and it's going to take me a little while to get that back up. We're going to act like that we are here at this point. We are right here at this point, and we're stitching away. Some machines have the capability of being able to, when you stop, your needle down or your needle up in a hovering effect for the foot. If your machine has that and you're not using it and you love to do applique, you definitely want to check that out. And if you're going to start doing applique, you need to check to see if your machine does that, because there's two things we want to do. With applique, we definitely want our needle to be down when we stop, because when I let my foot off of the pedal and I stop, that needle is staying in place where it last left off. So I'm not shifting the fabric. The stitches are going to line up exactly where I want it to, and there's no room for error. Another feature that I like is that my foot is hovering. It's not pressing down on the fabric. And with that hover effect on it, I'm able to move and maneuver my fabric to different angles and different places I want it to go. So now this is where it ended for me. My needle's down and my hover's on. So I don't have to go and make sure that my needle's down or reline up because it's up. I don't have to push my foot up to release the fabric. It's doing that hovering effect. So now I can go ahead and turn my fabric and just hit go and start going all over again. So that's another feature that I really, really wanted to show you, and make sure that if your machine does have it, to turn that on. So Ashley, I'm gonna let you go ahead and do a little bit of a close-up so they can see where that stitch needs to be right outside that line, and then how it's catching that piece on that heart while I rethread. So like I said, this is just how I do my raw edge applique. There are 110 different ways. You're just gonna have to find the way that you like to do it. So, okay. Well, if you're wanting to make this table runner that has these different hearts and the different appliques on them, definitely check out on our Friends of Two Chicks quilting page, because Autumn has everything posted there and the instructions for that. And if you need any help and tips and tricks with your applique, just give me a call and let me know. That's what I have for you today, guys, and we'll be back tomorrow. Bye.